This is the future.
Hi, my name is Dale, and I want to welcome you to my channel, Observer of Anomalous Objects. My channel has a lot of great content and great guests as well. You can help it out by subscribing to the channel, sharing it with your friends, and by hitting the like button as well. Also, don't forget to hit the bell to get all of the latest episodes. You're really going to enjoy them. I hope you have someone with you watching this right now, because this podcast is going to be about the land of the scary. It's about the land of the unknown. It is sacred land filled with paranormal activity that goes back thousands and thousands of years. Let me tell you something this morning. No one is more qualified to talk about this land than my two guests today, Navajo Rangers Stanley Milford Jr. and Jon Dover. They had a front row seat to some of the scariest stories ever told. Michele Meiner's friend and co-host of theirs on the Paranormal Ranger podcast will be joining us as well and giving us her perspective. Before I bring on Stanley, Jon, and Michele, let me tell you a little about them first. Stanley Milford Jr. grew up between rural Oklahoma and the Navajo Reservation, later earning degrees from Haskell Indian Junior College, Fort Lewis College, and the University of Arizona. He graduated from the U.S. Indian Police Academy and served over 23 years as a Navajo Ranger, rising through the ranks from recruit to delegated chief ranger. During his career, he oversaw the Special Projects Unit, SPU, where he was a federal firearms instructor, SWAT team leader, and member of the Navajo Police and FBI Drug and Gang Task Force. The SPU handled sensitive, high-profile investigations, ranging from dignitary protection to emergency operations, and uniquely, a small percentage of cases involving the unexplained, such as UFOs, Bigfoot, skinwalkers, and other paranormal activity. After retiring from the Rangers in 2021 and a brief role with the Navajo Department of Justice, Milford was approached by HarperCollins to write a memoir following his appearance on Netflix Unsolved Mysteries. His book, The Paranormal Ranger, a Navajo investigator's search for the unexplained, chronicles official and personal encounters with the unknown. Today, he continues to collaborate with fellow investigator Jon Dover on the Paranormal Rangers podcast on KGRA. Although most of their cases took place between 1998 and 2010, their investigations and mysteries they uncovered remain unforgettable. Now we're going to move to Jonathan Redbird Dover. Let me get that switched. Over 31 years of service, including a role at the City of Winslow Police Department, the National Park Service, the Navajo Historic Preservation Department, and the Navajo Nation Rangers, where he retired as a lieutenant in 2011. A graduate of the Navajo Nation Police Academy, he earned top honors in criminal investigations, academics, and marksmanship. Later trained at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. In addition to conventional law enforcement, Dover has led investigations into unexplained phenomena such as Bigfoot, UFOs, haunting, and Navajo witchcraft, drawing on his deep cultural knowledge and field expertise. A skilled artist, photographer, guitarist of 47 years, and published author. He is Navajo, Southern Cheyenne, and Oklahoma Cherokee, and currently resides in Oklahoma. Last but not least, I want to introduce Michele Meiner as well. Michele Meiner is the vice chairman of the International UFO Bureau Board of Directors, where she draws upon her extensive experience in cultural preservation, community engagement, and UAP research to advocate the organization's mission. A proud Native American, Michele represents a blend of three nations, the Navajo, Chippewa, and Pawnee, offering a unique and valued perspective as an advisor and partner on First Nation projects. Her deep connection to her heritage fuels her commitment to preserving indigenous accounts of unidentified anomalous phenomena and fostering respectful dialogue between communities and researchers. Michele's work in the Uinta Basin, a hotspot for anomalous activity, has been pivotal in uncovering and analyzing patterns of UAP encounters. Her efforts to collaborate with local communities, particularly indigenous groups, have illuminated the region's rich history of unexplained phenomena while honoring traditional knowledge. As a member of the Navajo Rangers paranormal team, Michele bridges cultural wisdom with scientific integrity, ensuring that indigenous perspectives are not only preserved, but integrated into broader research efforts. And so without any further ado, let's go ahead and let's add the three of them to stage right now. I want to ask everyone to welcome them as they come on the stage this morning. It's good to have you here. I can't wait. I mean, you guys have some stories that are absolutely amazing. But I want to start off with some things before you got involved with this paranormal research or activity where you were asked. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. But I'm talking specifically to start with to Stanley and Jon, you know, some scary things that you faced prior to being put in charge of that. And Stanley, I was thinking about, I don't know if Jon was involved with it or not, but I was thinking about those two killers that you had to go out. And I think you were a young ranger at that time, and you had to go out and kind of, you know, learn the ropes and learn what it really took to be a ranger, especially in the face. I mean, it's one of those deals where the hunters could very easily become the hunters. And so why don't you share that with Stanley? And if Jon, if you were a part of that, you can jump into, or you can, after Stanley's done, you can share your story.
So early on, as I came onto the department, I had only been out of the academy 4 months when an officer named Dale Claxton, working for Cortez Police Department, was shot and killed in broad daylight as families were going to school and going to work. He was gunned down by these three militia personnel. They walked up to him, his patrol unit, after he had initiated a traffic stop, and with the full automatic AK-47, they opened up on him. It was a very grisly scene there where Officer Claxton died. And there happened to be a law enforcement training that was going on that day, and it ended up in, as it went along, as the largest manhunt in the Southwest. And I was asked to assist Navajo Police Department, and by taking some watercraft up to that operations location, the command center, and which I did and volunteered to do. And but once I got up there, I ended up meeting some of the command personnel that I was already familiar with, and they pulled me in to do some SWAT work with them, and I ended up fulfilling the role as tail end Charlie, which in SWAT work, that's the last guy in the stack that makes sure that the rear guard is covered. And during that time, I was able to utilize state-of-the-art night vision equipment up there in that theater and was able to witness some objects that couldn't be seen with the naked eye while I was there. One evening after about 30 hours in the field, I came back late at night, and I crawled under a trailer that was attached to my truck, a flatbed trailer, and so I was so exhausted, I was just out.
You
And
weren't worried about snakes? You weren't worried about snakes?
at that time, you were so exhausted, you probably would have curled up with a snake for a little bit of warmth or something. But one of the times that, like I said, I was under that trailer, and I opened my eyes, and there was a black mass laying there alongside of me, and caused me to jump and hit my head on the top of the trailer, and I ended up crawling into the back of my patrol unit with my hugging my AR-15 the rest of the night. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting experience. I worked on that for months.
You had a couple of close encounters, didn't you, where you thought you actually saw them looking down on them over on the other side of the river, and you found their stuff was there, right, at one point?
Right. One of the fugitives committed suicide within days after it started, and he had been going in and out of the water there at the San Juan River, and when you're staying wet like that, your skin will start to basically rot, and that's what he was experiencing, and he ended up committing suicide. But the other two eluded law enforcement for months and months and months as operations continued to try to capture these guys. But they were well versed. They grew up in that area of the Four Corners with all of the canyons, and it was a spider web of canyons. So it was like looking for a needle in a stack of needles, and so
Didn't they probably have stashes? Didn't they probably have stashes out there of weapons and supplies?
Oh, they did. They did along the San Juan River, and the river coming out of Lake Powell. They had pre-staged ammunition and different supplies in the little cubby holes that were along the Red Rock Canyons, and so they were well prepared. They knew what they were doing.
Well, it must have worried you guys too, because you never know where they're going to be at. You never know if you're in their sights. I mean, that had to be kind of a real wake-up call for what
There
it was
was
like.
times I recall that you could be, you'd have a full team of personnel, SWAT team, and your partner may be within 4 feet of you, and you couldn't even tell that they were even there. That's how thick the Russian olive and tamarisks and other brush was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, John, why don't you give us one of your scary stories prior to the official paranormal investigation?
Okay. We'll go back to the 70s.
Okay.
And I was in junior high. We would spend all our summers up in the mountains, and at my grandparents' cabin up there. And what happens is that when you're on the road like that, the truck was a 1971 Ford, and in those days, my grandfather didn't get air conditioning, didn't get any power steering, and we had an AM radio. I remember that, and so if you wanted to make it through the desert in Needles on the way back to California, you try to leave as early as you can, which is usually about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, to try to get through that desert area while it's still cool.
Right.
And so we're leaving, and on the way out, we basically are driving out. We're maybe less than a mile away from the cabin, and everything's black. It's a dirt road. During those days, it would take us about an hour and a half to 2 hours to get down to Sheep Springs, which was only 6 miles away. But the road was so bad and so rocky that you had to put it in granny gear and just go real slow.
Wow.
And as we're driving out, I saw this red ball of light about 6 inches in diameter weaving through the trees silently. And as I watched it passed near us. And my grandfather was reaching for his lever action 30-30, and he said, "I'm going to shoot it." And my grandmother is screaming at him at the top of her voice, saying, "Don't do it, don't do it. You put that gun back." And she told us later that the skinwalkers, when they travel, a lot of times they'll have a red light, and they can travel vast distances over a short period of time. And so she thought it was a skinwalker, which there were a lot of them up in the mountain, from that area. So, I watched it go past us, and then it went up the hill, the side of a mountain, and you could see it weaving back and forth through the trees. You could see the light reflected off the ground, the red glow, and totally silent. It was just surreal. And from growing up around there and herding sheep and goats, I happen to know that there's no roads that go up that mountainside where that thing went. And at the end, I was just left with this sense of wonderment and strangeness that something like this would happen, and I would actually see it. The thing was about 4 or 5 feet off the ground.
I have to apologize. My camera, for the first time ever, has decided not to be nice, so I'll be working on that. Michele, what were the scariest, maybe a scary thing that happened to you while I try to get my camera to behave?
Well, sure. And good luck. Technical difficulty seems to happen with our group when we get on to these type of podcasts. So in itself, it's a phenomena.
It's Jon. It's Jon.
Jon. Always Jon. Anyways, Dale, yes, I don't know if you know this, Dale. I started out in the Uinta Basin on Skinwalker Ranch, and that was my first project that I worked out there, and having covered 9 years in the Uinta Basin. On this particular night, it was a full moon, and we had like 4 of us, one being Jim Morse, the ranch manager at that time, myself, and 2 other observers, one being the on-site manager who used to live there. And we used to call him, we used to get into the Pope Mobile is what we called it, and go do some parameter checks. Yeah. And so this one particular night, and it's really famous, and they've talked about it on the show. We went to Homestead too, and I saw the hill light up. And so we rush over. Anytime the light illuminates like that and just kind of comes on and flashes such, we know that there's going to be a phenomena occurring. And it was a snowy night, and I've had actually a lot of experiences that were pretty intense there. But this particular night, as I was turning, something told me stop and turn the Pope Mobile off. And the on-site manager, she always had a camera with her. And for some reason, I told her, I said, just start taking pictures to the south of you. So she picked up the camera and started clicking. Well, she had a flash on her camera. She had a digital camera, by the way, and had a flash. And all of a sudden we saw a reptilian coming towards us. And she took 26 snapshots of this reptilian image. and it was getting closer and closer, and it's like, somebody had a strobe kind of effect, and it felt like something was coming towards us every time she flashed. And all of a sudden, something inside of me says, "Get out of there." And so I gunned it, and we went back to the ranch house, about a mile up the road. It's a pretty big property, and we ran in to the house, and she pulls out her USB chip card, and we put it into her computer, and we caught 26 images of this reptilian being. And something told me, pick up your phone and start taking photos. And I did. And then I said, let's go through those again. Every one of them blacked out.
Wow.
Every one of those photos blacked out.
Wow.
And except for the one that I have on my camera. And through time, it has morphed. And the half the image is of a beautiful woman, and the other is an eye of a reptilian next to her.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
imagine you shared that one quite a bit on X or Facebook or whatever.
No.
No?
No.
Saving that for a book.
Yeah. There's a lot that I haven't told, and so that particular night, we've had all kinds of things happen on that ranch, but also in the Uinta Basin. So that was pretty powerful. And then later down the road, I had a dream, and this being came to me and told me why they look the way they do. And the suit they're wearing is too dense on our atmosphere, that they have to wear those intimidating kind of suits similar to the astronauts. So there's my Halloween story.
All right. We'll jump back to Jon and Stan for a second. You guys got involved with the paranormal activity because your ranger chief picked you guys. And so my question is, why did he pick you guys? Was it because of your qualifications? Were you just unlucky or lucky, however you want to look at it? So how did you get picked? How did you two were you guys already a team before? Had you worked together before? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out why he picked you guys. Was it your qualifications, or were you just the senior guys, or what was it?
One of the things you have to realize is culturally with the Navajo, you have taboos within the culture, traditional taboos. And one of those things is things related to death and burial and all of that kind of thing. So that's held really as something that you don't really mess with. And yes, Jon and I are both Navajo, but really our childhood upbringing, a lot of it was off the reservation, off the Navajo Reservation. Mine being in Oklahoma and Jon's being in Los Angeles. And so even with the chief at the time, I mean, he is a full-blooded Navajo. He too grew up between non-native, being raised in the Salt Lake City Mormon culture as a child, and that of where he lived on the reservation. But it allowed the three of us to view these the subject matter of paranormal and these things from a perspective of both the Western view of the scientific and Western view, and that of a spiritual traditional teachings of the Navajo. So we were able to see things from both of those perspectives. And Chief was well aware of that. And Jon's background is as a specialist in archaeological enforcement. So Jon was in those ruined sites and a lot, and so for the two of us, we were able to deal with a lot of these taboo related issues in such a way that we didn't let it hinder what our mission was on each case. We would focus, just like with SWAT, you focus on what your mission is, and you trust in your training and all of that to get you through to the end after the operation is over. And even if there's bullets flying, you don't focus on that kind of thing, that threat. You rely on your training, and hopefully that's going to carry you through to the end where you don't have any bullet holes on you, and the creator will keep you safe through those times.
So was that kind of unique for you and Jon? Maybe some of the other Rangers didn't have, that, a foot in two different worlds, so you can be able to look at it from two different perspectives.
Jon and I were already special projects, so
yeah, and you have to understand that the traditions are so rigid, and people are so fearful. I took a ranger out with me to a poltergeist case, actually, and during that case, I walked around where the residence was, and what I found was that there was an old hogan there, that they're 8-sided structures. But this one was old. It was probably built back in the 1920s. And when they're abandoned, they collapse in on themselves, and they're gone. So there was just some wood, some logs, that were rotting out there. In the middle was human remains that were exposed. A skull, rib cage, all that kind of stuff in a fetal position. And what they did in the old days is that if you died, they would bury you in the hogan, and then they would just let the hogan just go back to the earth over time. Now, what these guys had been doing is that they sent the kids out and says, "Go get some wood." And so kids being kids, of course, they went to the nearest wood pile, which was these old logs, and started taking parts of it and burning them in the wood stove. And by doing that, they experienced a lot of different poltergeist activity, and there were ghosts present. And when I found the human remains, I told them, I says, is this where you're getting your wood from? And the kid said, yeah, that's where we get it. And I told him, I said, you can't use that wood. That's somebody's grave.
Yeah.
But at the time I had taken another ranger with me, and I was trying to instill knowledge in other rangers about this line of work, because Navajo Rangers besides an archaeologist, are the only ones that can do human remain reburials. And in this case, what I did is I capped it, which is putting a whole bunch of rocks on top so the erosion would stop. And the other officer did not want to get anywhere near that grave. And I literally, if you could imagine, grabbing somebody by the back of the gun belt and by the back of the collar, and literally pushing them into the scene and having them fight you like a toddler.
Wow.
They would not go anywhere near that.
I know this ranger, and I can just imagine like trying to put a cat in a bathtub full of water to bathe it or something. It's funny.
Did he stick with it, or was that enough for him to say this job isn't for me?
No, they're still there.
They're still, I think they're still there to this day.
Okay.
Just shock treatment, basically. Now, I think it's pretty cool that you guys were picked. Did any guys ever make fun of you guys, like little jokes or snickers? I mean, to me, when I hear about what you guys did, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the X-Files. You guys were like the X-Files for the Navajo Rangers, and they had a nickname for Mulder. It was Spooky Mulder. And so I was wondering, did they have any nicknames for you? Did they tease you? Did they make fun, or would they just take this stuff seriously?
I'm sure we got it both from existing rangers and the Navajo police. I'm sure, but the thing is, most people that live out there know this stuff exists. It ain't a matter of that um, that they don't believe in it. They do believe in it. They know this stuff exists, whether it's spirits or UFOs or any of that. They have their own encounters, but they keep it at bay. And again, like you had said earlier, John and I, we didn't volunteer for this. The chiefs looked at us too and said, you two are going to head this special project section." And at the time, everything that we did was yes, sir, and that was it. And that's the way it was. So
it's actually refreshing to hear that it's more acceptable in First Nation cultures. Why do you think the difference? Why is, like, we just call it Western culture versus First Nation culture? Why do you think it's been through the years such a taboo, in the sense that nobody wants to believe it, and if you bring it up, people think there's something wrong with you? So why do you think is it because of experience? Is that the difference, or is there something else?
I'm gonna let my partner jump in.
Yeah, culturally, you have, and I want to be clear here. When you say First Nations, you're talking about tribes in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Are considered really? First Nations. Yeah,
I didn't realize
there are 633 tribes in Canada. Wow. We only have 574 recognized Indian tribes in the United States that hadn't been wiped out. So,
and then there's Mexico too.
Yeah, and then there's Mexico, which has its own tribal systems. Or not even Mexico, I'll say South America.
Mm-hmm.
So there's thousands of tribes in the Americas. When you look at the cultural aspects, most tribes don't have anything to do with the dead, because in a spiritual sense, they know that those spirits can come back. I'll only speak to the Navajo side, but in Navajo culture, you have this idea that once somebody dies, you are no longer to speak their name, because to speak their name, you're inviting that spirit to come back and be there with you. You typically don't go to the graveside funeral, the internment, because when you're in the graveyard, other spirits can come and attach themselves to you and go back to your home. A lot of Navajos will go somewhere else afterwards and go to town and go shopping, go do a whole bunch of other stuff, with the idea that these spirits may be disoriented and not follow them home. So there's
effect.
Yeah. And so it's a very real thing. I mean, they even have usually a pail with cedar burning, hot coals and cedar. And you can pray and smoke yourself afterwards and purify yourself for protection after the funeral. So it's a very real thing. And, we recognize that there's a spiritual component in all of this. And that's the information, the Anglo culture is all science.
Right.
And so you have to be very sciencey, but then they turn their back when anything comes to spiritual aspects.
Yeah, if you can't test it, if you can't put it in a tube, if you can't show it, then it doesn't exist. And yet so many people, even in, Western culture, they still experience it, but nobody wants to believe them. Luckily, things are starting to turn around. I mean, that's the good thing about it. But it seems like culturally wise, like I said, I apologize for not understanding First Nation didn't represent all Native Americans. I should have used that term instead. But, I think probably a lot of people, so it was good that you brought that up, John, because there's probably a lot of people that just think, well, First Nation just means those that were here first, not a specific tribe in Kansas, which ironically, Guess where I was born?
Kansas.
In Kansas. Yeah. Also, and I know you're from Oklahoma. My grandfather's born in Oklahoma. And one of the exciting things, it doesn't mean I have much blood, but I found out my 6th great grandmother was Choctaw. I found that through Ancestry, had no idea at all. And I know I have some Cherokee blood as well, but that one was pretty excited because she had a certificate and everything, you know, had her name on it from the 5 civilized tribes and stuff. So we may have some ancestors back there somewhere that intersect at some point or another. But
Jon had mentioned earlier about conducting a reburial. So in that part of the Southwest, you end up with, because of erosion, you end up with human remains exposed. And Jon had mentioned earlier about a reburial, and the Rangers are one of 3 entities that are permitted to rebury that of the human remains. And so we would do that quite often because it happens throughout that whole region. So
was there like a ceremonial cleansing you had to go through? And so I wouldn't ask any specifics because I know obviously that's not something
we individually would do those things when we encountered human remains. There are other ceremonies and things that medicine men are capable of doing in regards to those kind of things if there's problems related to it that are persistent. So yeah.
Well, one of the things that wasn't mentioned, if the deceased died in their own hogan, the family would have to destroy the hogan itself and burn it. And then the deceased family could not mourn because the spirit would still linger on the earth. And that's the reason why we don't mess with that. We want them to go on to the next stage of life.
Which is interesting because a lot of the paranormal activity that I've studied and researched, especially with ghosts and spirits, and I had an event where my sister came to see me in a dream. And then my brother-in-law showed up later on in the dream, and he told me that she was getting ready to cross over. And having talked to Margie Kay of the Unex Network and having her on a couple times and talking to others, it seems like, at least, you know, from their mindset and others that I've talked to, that sometimes ghosts are the result of people who are staying behind because of some unresolved issue. And if that's true, I think my sister would have stayed behind because of her husband worrying that he was going to fall apart and lose his business and stuff like that. But I found it really interesting because she did, honestly, I it was real as real could get, that she came to my dream to check on me because it was actually a night I was mourning. When I woke up from the dream, my pillow was wet from tears. Oh. And so I'd actually been physically crying in that dream. And that's a little strange in itself, but I find it interesting what you said, Michele, about, causing the spirits to linger, that there are other ways of looking at it as well. That's very interesting. Where did you guys, Jon and Stanley, where did you guys do most of your investigations? Was it mainly on reservation lands, and what states would that include?
Well, it was primarily the Navajo Reservation. Navajo Reservation is 27,000 square miles.
Right.
Plus, primarily in the state of Arizona, then New Mexico, and then Utah, and then now even in the state of Colorado. We have Wolf Springs Ranch and Boyer Ranch, which house a lot of livestock, bison herds, but Jon and I, in and after 9/11 occurred, that event really changed how law enforcement conducted business. Now there was a factor of terrorism that affected all law enforcement agencies, and having to be prepared through the NIMS, or National Incident Management System training, Incident Command System, ICS, all of that training we now had to be fully trained in for special operations. And although there was times Jon and I were commissioned, we were commissioned by the Utah State Police as state police officers working the Utah Winter Olympics. So there was times, special situations where our jurisdiction took us outside the Navajo Reservation, but primarily the paranormal stuff was situated within the jurisdiction of the Navajo Nation in the Four Corners area. So,
okay, Michele, where did basically in your research, where does it basically, what's the area that, would it be state, would it be tribal, or what areas or is it much broader than that?
Well, it's broader than that. It's really interesting. The Uinta Basin has been pretty much where I've landed in the beginnings, because I wasn't doing paranormal 9 years ago. In fact, this is where it came to existence into my conscious life. And it was really interesting having been on that first project, and then having gone and worked with the Ute natives, in that area with the indigenous. It was a broad spectrum of the whole Uinta Basin is where it's been concentrated. I also did it southern Utah area, where I had phenomenal sightings of UFOs every time I visited. I had a project down there I was working on. So that's where most of my UFOs experiences occurred, were down in southern Utah. What was really interesting about up in the Uinta Basin, when you get to go on Ute lands, you experience their lores of the little people, the sprite world, the Bigfoot encounters that you have, and you start to integrate. Like this weekend, and I'll share this another little bit of a ghost story. I went camping with some friends up there in Uinta Basin, and there was this one area that's concentrated paranormal. And one morning, my friend and she and I woke up early, and we were sitting by the fire, and all of a sudden we observed this. We thought it was fog, and all of a sudden it started to shift and morph and do all kinds of things that normal fog wouldn't do. And she's pretty sensitive to spirit, and she says, "Oh my goodness, those are entities coming to visit with us." And it stayed there for about a good 15-20 minutes, and it was manipulating something you would see on a movie, where some fog would come in, and then you're expecting something to come through that fog. But it manipulated itself, and it was doing all kinds of shapes and shifts and everything. So that was really kind of a cool experience. She was more in fear of it than I was, maybe a little bit alarmed, but I was really enjoying the perspective of it shifting and shaping in its way. And the other thing that occurred while we were camping, we could hear clocks ticking. And we were thinking, where's that coming from? Because we're right in the middle of the woods. So that occurred. So those kind of things happen in in that area.
Those are experiences that you never forget. You have things that help you remember them. They're triggers and stuff like that. One of my questions is, I want to promote your podcast, Paranormal Rangers podcast. But Michele, how did you end up teaming up with Stanley and Jon?
Well, this is what happened. I met Jon through, he was on an episode of Skinwalker Ranch, and my partner, Jim Morse, says, "Hey, you got to meet this Navajo Ranger. His name is Jon Dover." And Stan had not been there at that time. And he says, "I want you to come to dinner." So we went to dinner, and it turns out me and Jon came from the same clan, where Dene is considered the Navajo Nation. And but the clan we both is Kiani is our clan. So I found out he was my uncle through our clan and such. Wow. And so we had a lot in common. We spoke a lot about his experiences on the Navajo Nation, and we just got talking, and we decided, hey, let's just get us three together and create this wonderful podcast. And we want to talk about our culture, but mostly not to fear, but because the Navajo Nation, our cultures have been dealing with this for millennia. So that's one reason how this all came together.
You said, do not fear. Is that what you're saying? Try and teach them not to be so afraid of these things, and just learn to live with them and not live in a constant state of of terror.
Yeah, exactly. And these guys are trained. They were trained in their career, where they had to, not be reactionary, but be observant and on task, and don't fear, just handle the situation. And I've learned that through them, because I get startled, believe me, it does happen. We have our moments, and
The thing is, that I really took away with this in meeting Michele, you know, with a lot of the work that Jon and I have done over the years and the people we meet, just like with you, Dale, I mean, the relationship we have now, I mean, it's like we've known each other for years and years and years. And that's the way it was with Michele. She just working with me and Jon, it's like we knew her, all this time. And we just, it couldn't be a better fit of three people approaching this stuff. Just like with me and Jon, just like, we get compared to X-Files, where you have two different personality types that'll look at a problem or a situation from different perspectives and will contribute their ideas and to this issue. And it's the same way now with Michele. She adds that feminine component where she can look at a problem and see things that maybe Jon and I didn't pick up on initially. So it works perfectly.
Thank you, Stan.
Yeah, I think you guys are a great team. I want to start transitioning to the paranormal itself. Now, I want to save Stanley's ghost spirit event for last. That's a hook. I mean, if you really want to hear an amazing story, and we're hearing all kinds of amazing stories as we go, but that one really, especially the coins dropping, because Margie Kay had told me a story about that with Ginger Rogers. We'll get into that later, but it was really it was a special story, and that's why I wanted to make sure, and scary as anything as well, and we'll get into that in a bit. But let's go ahead and start with like your UFO stories. Were there any stories that Stanley, you and Jon worked on together where you were investigating a UFO, or did you guys end up doing those separately?
If we can, I'll let Jon lead into a situation where he and there had been a person who had drowned on the San Juan River, and Jon and I were assisting the National Park Service and Navajo Police. If Jon could jump in there and tell a little bit about that.
Yeah, we were, again, voluntold to handle a case. And I was at a conference, and they called, or they came up and they says, we need you to get up to the Lake Powell, which is another 100 miles north, and take the department boat, get gas, take food, and go. And there's a guy that drowned up in the San Juan River, and they haven't found the body yet. So typically in a case like that, you wait about 3 days. The gases in the body will expand, and the bodies will usually float if the water is not too cold. And so we went up there with that idea that we might find the body on the river. So in order to do that, you launch at the Lake Powell launch ramp, and we took the boat. I think round trip it was about 80 miles across the water through these canyons. You had to have a GPS, because if you got lost, those canyons are like a maze. And we got up to the entrance of the San Juan River, and we hit a debris field from the flash flooding. And so there were logs and everything you can imagine just floating in there for about 100 yards. And, when you're in a boat 40 miles from the launch ramp, you don't want to destroy your prop and get stranded out there. So we said, okay, we can't go any further. There's no way we can get through this stuff. So we're going to call it quits. But by that time, it was already late and the sun was going down. So we said, okay, let's go to the shore, find a place to camp. And we had brought our cots because there is nothing like waking up in the morning with a snake laying by you. So, and that's happened before. So you sleep on a cot. So the snakes, you know, they might curl up under your cot, but at least they won't be right next to you. And we're, you know, I had gassed up the boat again. We brought extra gas with us. And we're bedding down for the night, just laying there. It's dark. We're looking at the sky as you just lay on the cot. Stands over on the side on his cot, and I'm on mine. And suddenly he says, "What's that?" And as we watched, there was a kind of an orangish red ball of light far up in the sky above us. And it was traveling from west to east. And what it was doing was a very slow, sharp zigzag as it went across the sky, just almost leisurely, but the zigzag shape was very pronounced. And as we watched it, we just kind of sitting there going, you know, and just to be honest with you, you never ever think about grabbing your phone or getting a camera or anything else. You're just mesmerized by what you're seeing. And as we watched it, it got over to the east, and I see two fighter jets coming behind it, and they're full afterburner, single jet on each side. We figured that they were probably F-16s because they're single engine, and they were going for everything that they had, all the power that was available, which is what happens when you open up and get the afterburners going. And they were just not even catching up. They were just following it. And as we watched, this light sped up. And when I mean sped up, you see this zigzag shape, you know, like this going across. And the zigzag, even though it was still sharp, it just started going like this. I could only think that any pilot that was in there was probably jam, you know, at that point, because no human body could withstand those kind of G-forces. And it just sped off and went over the horizon and left these jets in the dust.
Wow.
And we're just going, whoa, you know. And so that was our UFO encounter out in the boondocks. Quite amazing.
They usually don't come when you're ready for them. That's for sure. I had one where I was ready, had an orb, and I had night vision, brand new pair of night vision binoculars, and I had it all recorded. Everything was beautiful and perfect, and the stupid video thing on it was corrupted. Now, we did manage to get 3 stills, but the other problem was I was so naive at using it that I had zoom all the way out, thinking, well, it's farther away, just go max zoom. Well, I've learned since using them, I don't remember if it's 6 or 12 magnification, but that works. But we did get the 3 stills. Now, the other thing was a year ago, July, I got back on July 10th, I guess it would be 2024. I was in my backyard and I'd been looking at satellites, and I'm relating to what you were talking about. Is I see this thing and I think it's a satellite, but then as I'm watching, it's oscillating, it's bouncing. And then I know, okay, I've watched enough satellites, I know they don't do that. And then all of a sudden it took a right turn. But I found it interesting that you had one, and mine wasn't as extreme as yours, but it was clearly oscillating just like that across the sky, and just absolutely blew me away that was going on. Michele, do you have a UFO story you'd like to share?
Oh yeah, plenty of them.
The best one. Pick the best one. Maybe that freaked out the most.
Well, this one was I did see, I used to see them in the sky in Uinta Basin, and they never had a tail number on them. They were white objects that used to go like the speed of like maybe 2 miles per hour. You can't do that with an aircraft, and so this would go really slow. And every time I went to go snap a photo, I get hit in the neck with something. Well, this particular evening, I was really tired, and we had before we would stay in Vernal, we'd stay there in Roosevelt, and the tribe had their own hotel out there, and there was no room at the end at the other one, and so we decided to stay at the Native American hotel there. And showered up, got in bed, and I heard a humming outside my window, and I couldn't move in my bed. I just couldn't move. And something started, I could hear the humming going, and all of a sudden, walked across my leg, invisible, walked across my leg back and forth. And I was just frozen there, and I couldn't move for a while. And finally, when I finally mustered my strength, I called my partner, and on the phone, I go, you need to come next door because I can't move. Something's been here. And so they went to check it out, opened up the curtains and everything. Finally, I got my energy back. And so, so I don't know if this thing had followed me, but I did see something that looked like, as you seeing Predator versus Alien on the show, where they're invisible, but you can see the outline. That's what I saw after seeing this in a UFO on that particular area that I was in. So that was pretty gnarly. Pretty.
I bet.
Yeah. Mhm.
Especially you could just see the outline. It's like, thank God it wasn't Predator though, right?
Right. I don't know, but something walked across my legs, but I was frozen there, paralysis, and I had to look into that, investigate it. But we both heard the humming. He heard the humming outside, but there was nothing there.
This isn't a question I had written down, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Have any of you had an experience that was really, really negative? I mean, something super, super scary, or is it kind of a broad range? Were they more that direction, more, more mundane or benevolent or whatever, or were they more malevolent? Why don't you guys share your experiences, all of you, on where some of them would fall in what degree, maybe 10% here, 90% here, or whatever.
Well,
I
was going to say, I've got a short one.
Okay.
I'll try to keep it short. Me and Stan were invited to go to Scotland to speak in the Stirling Paranormal Festival. And while we're there, we're staying in a 1850s cottage. And so this place was old to start with, and they set it up as this wonderful little Airbnb. They had a staff there. They had cooks. We would have eggs and bangers in the morning. And one night, we're bedding down. We're sharing a room, and the beds are really, really narrow, almost like little boarding school beds. And so we're laying in the dark, getting ready for the next day. And I'm awake, and I'm looking around, but the room is dark. Can't see anything. But in the room, what I saw was something rise up from the bottom of Stan's bed, a human figure that stood up. You could see the dark figure in the dark, and it walked toward the head of his bed and went through the wall.
Oh my goodness.
And then just a few seconds later, I hear Stan say, "John, are you awake?" And I says, "Yeah." And he says, "Something just sat down on the corner of the bed as I was laying here, and the bed went down."
Yep.
And then it stood up again. And I told them, yeah, I saw it walk through the wall. And
Wow.
so later on, we asked the people that work there, and they were like, "Oh yeah, this place has ghosts in it, you know, and no big deal." It didn't frighten us, but it was just very unusual.
I had that happen on my bed. I was facing inward towards my wife, and something put its hand down on the bed behind me. You could just feel the whole mattress go down. And then I turned around to look, because that's the first thing you're going to do. And there was absolutely no one there. And that's just one of several things, but I can completely. Have any of you, maybe a better way of asking the question, have any of you ever been hurt by the paranormal? You've had some, okay, that's what I want to hear. This is Scary Tuesday, so let's get the scary stuff out there.
I'll go ahead. Yeah, I had that particular day. We were doing another parameter check, and I had 3 witnesses with me, and I had a laser light, and we were shining it towards the north part of the ranch, and we were scaling. It had a laser light going towards the Book Cliffs. And all of a sudden I see these huge red eyes. I mean, they were huge. And one of the other individuals was running towards it, and I told it stop, and it would turn its head really slow like this. And but the eyes were just gigantic. And so when I went back to where we were staying at a condo, all of a sudden, I guess there was an Al Pacino movie on. I had something to do with the devil. I don't know why it was even on. And my legs started to cramp. I mean, severely cramp, where it dropped me to the floor. And I couldn't, I mean, it was like something was running up and down my legs inside my body, and I couldn't get a hold of it. And so my partner panicked and knocked on the door of the guy who owned the hotel, and they took off my pants. I said, "Take off my pants. It hurts too much." And they put a blanket over me and everything, and it wouldn't go away. And my muscles were contorting so bad. And I said, and all of a sudden my spirit recognized, turn off that TV. It's feeding off the negative energy.
Oh, wow.
And if once they shut off that TV, it subsided. And so, and then I was so worn out. I just, and they put warm compresses on afterwards to tame the muscles. So that happened out in the Uinta Basin when I was there, when I first started the project.
So there's a lot of things in the paranormal. When I hear that, and you mentioned the devil, and I don't, even though I'm a Christian, I don't see demons behind everything, and I'm very open to different aspects of the paranormal. But when I hear something like that, it's like one of the thoughts that does come to my mind, was this some kind of demonic being that was attacking you?
Right. And then when my spirit recognized it, turned off that TV, because it was, and I don't even know why that show even came on the TV.
It was like it was feeding off of it, though.
Yeah, it was. Oh, that was painful.
Well, thank goodness your spirit told you what it was, so you knew exactly what to do about it.
Yeah.
What about Bigfoot now? We're getting shorter on time, so let's keep the stories concise as we can. But have you ever had any of you ever had a Bigfoot encounter where like the hair on your arms just stood up on end?
I've had a couple of experiences actually witnessing this entity that people refer to as Bigfoot. One situation was, there was a family on the Navajo Reservation that near their home and around their home, they have encounters with this entity all the time. And they invited me and a couple other investigators to come out, and we packed up the equipment, night vision and thermal and everything that I had. And we went out with that family one night, and we did witness the classic Bigfoot entity, this thing that's much taller than a man by several feet tall, and covered in hair, and and this was using the night vision and thermal. And excuse me, with both of those devices, I was able to witness this thing, and it was one of those paradigm shifting, you know, incidents where when you actually see this thing and realize that it's not make believe, it's not folk tale, it's not legend. There is something that you're looking at, a solid, tangible being or person or creature. Um, that was the time that I witnessed it. The next day, we had gone out, me and another investigator, to that same location to look for further evidence during the day around noon. And we were having these large rocks that were coming from 500 feet down the face of this cliff, uh, up, flying up, over 500 feet to where we were at and landing within like 10 feet of us. And the largest of those rocks probably weighed a good 25 to 30 pounds. And you could hear, like that particular rock, you could hear it like a cannonball coming through the Ponderosa pines as it was flying toward us and breaking the limbs and till the thud of when it impacted the ground. And another time I was coming home from Monument Valley, having spent my work week in Monument Valley, and we're coming home to Sawmill, Arizona. And so there's about 3 hours difference, 3.5 hours. And but as I got into the Salee area where Wheatfields Lake is, as I was approaching the lake, I had one of these things that, again, that people refer to as Sasquatch or Bigfoot, cross the road in front of me, about 150 yards in front of me. And it was the classic appearance of what we know as Sasquatch, something that's very tall and covered in hair, and its stride is a good maybe 4 feet or more, and crossed right in front of me, and I seen it with my own eyes, and so I know it exists. And so that was
where I live, that Bigfoot is beyond myth. I mean, a lot of people out here believe it, especially out in the wooded area. I live in a very, very, very wooded area, and so friends of mine have seen them. They've heard them hitting the trees, the rocks. So when that rock was thrown, did you feel like it took a lot of force to be able to do that? Maybe more than even like a normal human?
Well, it's coming from 500 feet down below us, and so there's nothing that I know mechanically other than like a catapult or something like that, trebuchet or something like that. But there wasn't anything like that, and but about 15 different rocks. I still have them to this very day, and in some of the collection that I have of different paranormal evidence items, and just like with the coins, and
Do you think he was throwing them at you or just near you because he wanted you to go
I
away?
think it was there to get our attention, and if I think if it had wanted to hit us, I think that it could have done that, and a rock that size, it would have definitely taken you out if it hit any part of your body. It's like I said, it was like a cannonball coming through the trees. So yeah, very interesting.
Dale, I look at him as interdimensional beings, so I'm going to show you a footprint right here.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so when us and the Rangers went up to Canada a couple of years ago, there was a gentleman by the name of Mike Patterson. You may have known him. He caught this one, and he called her Nephitia. And I've had 2 sightings of Bigfoot. So while we're in the center where we spoke inside the gymnasium there, the interdimensional being of a Bigfoot showed up right in front of me. And I was just like, did everybody see that? Did you everybody see that? And all the gentlemen all they do is smile. And what I learned about Bigfoot is they're healers. And up in the First Nations up there believe that they're healers. And I felt that I call it Bigfoot medicine now. I felt the healing aspect, and afterwards I felt wonderful. I had another occasion on Blind Frog Ranch to see it with my eye, and somebody caught it on camera. So we have a camera photo of this particular Bigfoot. And there was a Bigfoot hunter with us, and he took a group of us, and he says, I want you to look up there. And apparently it was a female. And he came back to me later on a phone call and says, she wants to sit with you. And, at the time you think, ooh, I don't know if I'm ready for that encounter, to sit down in a circle with a Bigfoot family. And so I have often wondered about that. But, again, it's our experiences are for a reason while we're here. And, for whatever reason, I needed that encounter, just have the healing process and learn that process that they're healers. I mean, according to the natives up there up in Canada, that's how they look at them.
I think if they were truly aggressive, and because there's a show up in Alaska they had where supposedly there was a Sasquatch Bigfoot that was killing a bunch of people, and there was a cannery there and it ran everybody out. But it seems like to me, if they were homicidal, there'd be a lot more dead people out there. I seem to hear a lot more stories like the one you're talking about. And as far as Navajo culture, and some of the other Native American cultures, is Bigfoot looked at as something to be feared or revered?
I'll let Jonathan talk about that.
They're actually looked at. They've been known to be around Navajos since the 1600s. Is the first cases that are repeated orally down through the ages.
Let me just ask that question real quick. Did they coexist? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, what we found out was that they are there. People recognize that they're around. The idea is, yes, they exist. Leave them alone, and they'll leave you alone. And the Navajos always say, never look at it in the eyes, because if you look at it in the eyes, it can take control of your mind. Now, that statement always puzzled me until a medicine man told me that back in the 1600s, after the Navajos got horses, they had a group of Navajos that were on horseback, and they saw a Bigfoot and they roped him with braided horsehair lariats. And it sat down in the middle of them and just sat there on the ground, and it started to speak to them in Navajo. Now, Navajo is a very difficult language to learn. And, that's why it was the only unbroken code of World War II.
Yeah.
Was Navajo code talkers.
Yeah.
So this Bigfoot sat down, spoke to these Navajos and said, if you'll take me from north of Gallup here up to Mesa Verde and let me go, I will not trouble you again. So they rode with it between them, and then they got up to Colorado and let it go. Now, that always kind of bothered me at some level, that, how is Bigfoot speaking? Until it occurred to me that it was telepathic. And no matter what it said, you would hear it in your language. So that makes more sense, that if you look at it, it gets in your mind and it's telepathic and can communicate with you.
Yeah. It kind of between that and what Michele said, it kind of gets rid of the ape descendant theory out there. It seems to be much more than that. You were going to say something, Stan?
Yeah. One of the things is that throughout the years of conducting these paranormal investigations, that Jon and I found that the commonality among a lot of the different paranormal things was the fact that there is a dimensional aspect, whether it's UFOs or the Bigfoot or even hauntings and spirit activity, that you'll have these entities or contacts. They'll be right there present where you are. You're experiencing this, and then all of a sudden it crosses back over somewhere else. So this idea, concepts of things like string theory and things like that, and in the science world, that there's something to this, and the commonality is this idea of dimension. John and I at times lived out there in the woods, on various operations on the Navajo Nation. Again, like I said, the Navajo Nation is 27,000 square miles, like the size of the state of West Virginia. So there's some very forested areas that different times we're doing operations up there, and sometimes we're out there over a week in the woods. And but we never found the evidence that these things that people refer to as Sasquatch or Bigfoot were actually inhabiting the forest areas like what you would have with other wildlife, like the bears, the mountain lions, bobcats, coyotes. These things, you see the evidence of it where it has a den. Each day it'll travel out hunting and go to water, and you see these little trails that it establishes. And we never really found that with the Bigfoot. Yes, at times we would have over 25 to 30 people witness the same thing, and then all of a sudden it's gone. And yeah, it'd leave track evidence like what Michele showed, and hair evidence, and these different things, but it was present, and then all of a sudden it disappeared and would be somewhere else. And that was quite common with our Bigfoot investigation. So,
and one of the things that we found over years of doing investigations, 11 years, was that every time we had an increase in UFO sightings, we had corresponding increases in Bigfoot sightings and vice versa. So this is years and years of doing these cases. And, you can't ignore that kind of evidence. It's just there.
Yeah. The other thing that it would help explain is one of the things skeptics bring up is, well, they've never found a body of a Bigfoot. Well, if they're from other dimensions, maybe they go to the other dimension to die or whatever, their home dimension. That could explain it as well. Let's move on and let's talk about something a little scarier. And you're thinking, well, what could be scarier than Bigfoot? How about skinwalkers? And I'd like Stanley to kind of recount the one he had as a young man and he's driving, and that one still haunts me.
So for me, when I was in college in Kansas at Haskell Indian, at the time it was an Indian Junior College, and during the summertime I'd come back and work on the reservation in the Winter Rock area, and my father has a home in Fort Defiance, and I had come back and had been working with the Navajo Nation Parks and Recreation, and I'd borrowed my sister's car and had gone to the movies one night. And at that time, growing up in the 80s and even earlier in the 70s, I was a big fan of hard rock and heavy metal music. I learned to play guitar to that kind of music. And so this one movie called Maximum Overdrive had a soundtrack that was primarily the band AC/DC. And so I borrowed my sister's car to go watch this movie one night, and I didn't get out of that movie till after midnight. And as I walked into the lobby to throw away my trash, there was a little elderly Navajo man sitting on a little bench there in the lobby, and he ended up asking me if I could give him a ride home, and I told him, sure, I can do that. And so I take him to where it is he wanted to be dropped off, little over 7 miles from the theater there. And it was in a remote area, and I dropped him off and turned around and started for home. And as I was driving, there was something, that caught my eye. There was movement out of the passenger side of the vehicle, and but it was on the inside of the right-of-way fence that was running parallel to the highway. And so as I'm driving, I keep glancing over toward this, whatever it is that's moving over there. And it, initially I thought maybe it might have been a horse or something that was running there, because it was light colored, and I could see that something was there. And but soon, whatever this was, it was keeping up with me as I was reaching highway speed, and it ended up jumping the right-of-way fence, and it got closer and closer to the side of the vehicle. And as I'm glancing over toward it, whatever this was had the appearance similar to that of what we see today with a greyhound, that are in these competitive greyhound races. But this thing was a little bit more robust and a little bit taller. It was running on all fours, and its back came up above the side of the car, and it was all white from head to toe. And as at one point I look over toward this thing, and it's looking right at me, and it had these two very distinct fiery orange colored eyes that were glowing. They had like their own self-illumination, and it was the color. If you see these exit signs in most office places or movie theaters, that orange colored exit sign, that's the color of these eyes that were looking back at me. And as I seen this, and I looked at it, it had a mouthful of these sharp, jagged teeth, and I kind of slid down in the driver's seat as low as I could, barely seeing over the dash, and I didn't look back toward it. I don't know what it did at that point. It was within like 3 feet of the passenger side of the car at that point, but I was at highway speed, and it was still running by me. And I didn't look in my rearview mirrors or side mirrors or anything. I just floored it, and that road comes to a T, and I don't know how I made it around that curve, because I was flying into the gravel driveway at my dad's house, and come sliding in there and jumped out and ran in. And my dad was still up watching TV, and he could see that I was kind of out of breath, and something had happened. And he asked, what's going on? And I explained to him, described what I seen, and he said, that's a skinwalker. That's what you seen. So that was my experience.
So how fast were you driving, first of all, that he was keeping up with you?
I had to be well over probably 60 miles an hour on that particular road. The distance, given the distance of that, at least over 60. And so, yeah.
Did you feel like it wanted to hurt you?
This thing, yeah, its appearance, we talked about what we define as evil or negative, and John and I try not to get pulled into those biblical terms regarding this stuff, but I would say that was about as evil as anything could get. It looked like it was straight out of a horror movie, some type of werewolf thing. And
was it a message? Was it some kind of message it was sending to you? Because it sounds like it literally could have gotten you if it wanted, maybe, huh?
Later, my family had me see a medicine man because of that, and a ceremony was done, and I lost a cousin that was, him and I were so close in age, just months apart, and we were like brothers, and he died immediately following that, and in a automobile accident. And the medicine man said that was related to me seeing this thing, and I I follow that. I believe that's. I think there's an individual who I know today who was applying witchcraft, having witchcraft done to my family and me and our inner family, and I think that's the loss of my cousin was related to that, and me seeing this thing. It's almost anytime an individual Navajo person sees these entities referred to as a skinwalker or shapeshifter, which Jon had mentioned the 574 Native American tribes in this country. Uh, a lot of them have a reference for the shapeshifters, a human being that can change form from our physical body into that of an animal. And so in that particular situation, yeah, it was there was evil tied to that because there was an evil intent by somebody that was having somebody practice witchcraft to have something done.
So in your culture, everyone who is a witch or practicing witchcraft is for, I don't want to use the biblical term, but it's malevolent. Let's use that term. Is that true? So, Jon, why don't you explain that a little bit for a minute? I think Stanley did a good job of defining what it is. So maybe you can expound on that a little bit. But it sounds like a skinwalker is like a witch doctor, witch, something like that, who takes shapeshifts, takes different forms, and usually for malevolent reasons. And I've heard some of the other stuff with the witches and the spells and all that, but this is specific to the skinwalker.
Well, the idea, we call it a Navajo witch.
Okay.
Apologies to people who are aligned with Wiccan. We're not talking about witches like,
Right.
We actually saw a village of witches in Scotland, and they were some of the nicest people you could ever meet.
Really?
But a Navajo practitioner of witchcraft, there are several levels of witchcraft. One is learning how to shape change. And we've seen kids do this, young people.
Wow.
And it happens all the time. And the thing is that they go out, they terrorize communities, and to them, it's just a source of relieving boredom. And terrorizing a community gives you a sense of power. There is another one that can create poisons and do kind of like spells on people. And so this herbalist type can create different types of poisons that modern medicine doesn't know what it is. And they can't, there's no cure for it. There's another one called frenzy witchcraft, which is where you're steeped in more of the tradition of what goes behind it and more of the casting negative spells on people and destroying people that way. And then there's actually medicine men. My grandfather was trained at a very early age to be a medicine man. And he told me, later on, he became a Christian minister. But he said, in talking to him about these subjects, he said, you're taught everything. You are taught how to not only heal people, but you're taught all the negative stuff too, involving witchcraft. And the reason you're taught that, he says, is for you to be able to have a counter deal for whatever spell was put on them or whatever evil was directed their way. So you have to know how that curse was made before you can counteract it. And so there's all this that's going on. And in order to become a skinwalker, you have to basically sacrifice somebody that in your family that you love dearly.
Oh my goodness.
And so one of the other things they do typically is on top of necrophilia, having sex with dead bodies, is that you will dig up the dead and take the jewelry from the body and take it to the border towns and sell it. And so people that suddenly become wealthy on the reservation are looked at with suspicion, because skinwalkers will do this. So there's a lot that goes on. Now, originally, it was taught first man and first woman as a way of getting close to game and being able to blend in with them and then make the kill. Later on, it was used in times of war to gather intelligence on the enemy. And suddenly it turned into something just totally evil. And, to use that biblical term, or something totally negative. And my grandfather told me that when you're taught as a medicine man all this stuff, you have to decide if you're going to use this for good or bad. It's up to you to have a moral compass. And I have actually seen medicine men in the past that will do both. They'll put a curse on somebody, they'll bury things around their house, and then they'll go back and say, hey, I can cure you. And, here's where the items are buried and here's what they are. And it just, so I've seen that.
Right. Wow. That's incredible. Well, we're, Stanley and I talked earlier, trying to keep it at an hour and a half. We're going to go a little bit over because I want to make sure that we get Stanley's story in, because that one was so freaky. I still think about it, especially the pennies and the quarters and the nickels, whatever, coming down. So why don't you go ahead and share that story? Let's go ahead and start though. Like, first of all, who did you take with you? And my understanding is that these were not your normal circle of friends that you brought, that you had to go outside your normal circle because of taboos. Is that true? And then the other one is who asked you to come take care of this haunting at this building?
How this came about was the director of that particular program had reached out to the chief ranger, Leonard Butler, at the time. And she basically said, with my office, the staff are experiencing some really crazy things that they're accounting or recounting, and things moving, voices being touched, things of that nature. And so the chief had pulled me aside and he explained to me the request, and so
was this on the reservation or somewhere else?
No, it was in the heart of the reservation. It was a typical office building. This particular building had been renovated within the last 15 years, and it had been used over the years since maybe the middle 1920s for different purposes, or parts of that building were used for different things, and over the years. And so yeah, I was assigned, and there was an individual that John and I had relied on out of the Dallas area, a non-native guy who was an investigator, and he had money to burn, and he had a lot of these little fancy technical toys, for paranormal investigation. He was well versed in Bigfoot cases and haunting cases, all kinds of things. And so I reached out to him, and he was excited to come travel to the area. And he had friends and family that lived in that particular region. And then there was another individual who actually worked in the building. This guy was very active in his church and very spiritual. And he too was very excited to be a part of that particular investigation. He was like our jailer, because he had this big ring of of all these keys to every little lock throughout that whole building. And the building is 3 stories. There's 3 levels. And then there was an individual who I know of, who is an audiovisual specialist. You know, he knows everything there is to know about different cameras and camera systems and recording. And I reached out to him, and he definitely wanted to be a part of that project and or investigation. And so I arranged, 2 days on a holiday where there wouldn't be staff around, and we got in there in and around 9 o'clock. Me and the jailer got there, and he opened up the building, and I did my little walkthrough of the whole building to kind of get a feel or a mental picture of how I would go about doing these investigations. I was really new to this with a lot of these things, as Jon was too, and a lot of times we had to reach out to organizations like MUFON or Robert Bigelow's group, because he did have investigators into the paranormal. Michele worked with Robert Bigelow at times, early on when the Sherman Ranch was being known for phenomenon. And so Jon and I would reach out to these existing organizations that had investigators, and we would go about seeing how they would approach these things. And because it's kind of hard in some of these investigations, you have to adapt, what you learn. Like Jon went to the Federal Criminal Investigating Academy, but in this situation, it's kind of hard to put a Bigfoot in handcuffs. You're adapting to whatever it is you're investigating. And so it was really a learning experience. And so I had these 3 other investigators besides myself, and I'd done my walkthrough, and there was a large conference room table in the bottom part of that building, and I had gone in, and I was standing there leaning against that table, pondering about how I would go about this. And I had decided that table where I was at would be perfect for a command table, where we could set up our laptops and all of our different equipment we were using. But as I was standing there leaning against that table, all of a sudden, and I was there alone in that room, and it was well lit, but all of a sudden it was as though somebody took their finger and put it on the upper part of my lip where my mustache is, and rubbed it across, and then stopped, and then slowly moved it back across. And it was very distinct. It was like somebody put a finger on my lip, but immediately following that experience, there was 2 voices standing somewhere to my left side that they began conversing back and forth, and it was 2 male voices, 2 distinct male voices, carrying on a conversation. And I listened, and I tried to make out what they were saying, but I really couldn't determine that. And
could you determine language?
It may have been Navajo. We did other recordings later on that appeared to be Navajo language. But that happened, and the voices lasted maybe 10 seconds or so, 15 seconds or so of conversation. And so the other 2 guys arrived with their equipment, and we got everything offloaded and set up. And then I did my briefing to them, and I explained, there is something that's occurring here in this building, and I experienced it, and so be ready for it. And almost immediately following the briefing, we started to set out, and within minutes, we had a phenomenon that's commonly referred to as an apport, APPORT, where a physical object will materialize, out of nothing and appear, or sometimes it'll disappear. Sometimes things will move, and in haunting cases. But these were coins, They would fall. Just I witnessed at least 10 times with my own eyes coins falling out of thin air. There's nothing there, dead airspace, and a coin falls in the middle of the floor. And so for 2 days, there was a total of 66 coins. Sometimes the coins would come flying across the room and hit you. But one unique thing with the coins, one of the attributes was they would all land heads up. They would hit and behave just like a regular coin. You might have in your pocket, flip it in the air, and they'll hit, especially on concrete and smooth concrete, and spiral in and fall over. But they would all land heads up. Out of
What
all
are the odds? What are the odds? 66 coins. Every last one landed heads up.
Probability. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
If we all sat here today, took coins and flipped them into there, about half of however many times, let's say 100 times, about 50 would be heads up and about 50 would be tails. That's just the probability involved. And they were all different years. There was a lot of modern coins. There was a number of uniquely, there was a high number of what is known as a Lincoln wheat cent penny, which spans the 1920s to the 1940s or something, like maybe 50s, of these coins. And there was at least like 7 or 8 of these out of 60 66 coins.
There were 14 of them.
So it was, that's odd. So, but one of the unique things with the coins is that still happens to me to this very day. John and I, as we were going to Canada recently, Toronto, on an investigation, and with Michele, the night before we left out, we experienced coins visiting a friend of ours down in Phoenix, and we experienced coins while we're in Canada, and just on Saturday, this past Saturday. So that was the last time I had experienced a coin, was the Canada incident or investigation. Since then until now, I hadn't had any coins reporting that I know of. But the other day, on Saturday, I had a coin fall in my bedroom on the floor, and so it's still happening to this very day. I've come to, in my own belief and understanding of this stuff, I think it's spirit that knows me, and it sends these coins as a message for whatever's going on in my life. Me and my sister were going to travel to the Western Navajo Fair in Tuba City to see a concert with the band Slaughter and Great White from the 80s heavy metal times. And my mother was a big influence in our music experience growing up. All kinds of music, Motown, Beatles, Rolling Stones, and later the bands Kiss and all.
Yeah, we just lost Ace Frehley. That was really sad.
Yeah, Ace Frehley was a big loss to me. Matter of fact, today I was gonna paint my face like Ace's, but I couldn't find my silver paint, so face paint. So, but
it's interesting you bring that up, because I mentioned it earlier. I still want to get a couple things off that story, but I wanted to add in, when the first time you hear about the coins falling, it's an odd thing, but when you hear it enough, and you start to understand that this is somewhat normal with ghost or poltergeist spirit activity, because Margie Kay had bought Ginger Rogers' house, one of the ones she lived in, and she got a lot of different artifacts of things that Ginger Roger had owned, and she had some things that were duplicates. And and Ginger Rogers' famous song is "Pennies from Heaven," and so she was going to sell some of the duplicates, and all of a sudden pennies started dropping from the ceiling out of nowhere. Right. And she took it to mean that you're not supposed to sell this, you're supposed to keep it. And so then next time I hear it from you, and it's like, and then multiple people are experiencing this.
You know, haunting experiences, if you look around the globe and you go back in time, the experiences with, you know, spirits can go back to biblical times, you know, people that have had encounters with spirits. And quite often throughout the globe, the idea of apports and the experience of apports is actually very common with haunting phenomenon and activity. And I think it just, the size of a coin, the makeup of a coin is something that is readily available for a spirit to manipulate.
Right.
Out of all the coins I've experienced, and I have a whole large gallon Ziploc bag of these coins. John now has his own collection of some coins. And, you know, so it happens. And I think spirit can manipulate that with whatever energy it has. It can vocally make sounds, you know, talk to people, make, you know, talk, you know, like a human can. Even without a voice box, it can still do that for somehow, but they can also manipulate coins quite easily.
Well, let's we running towards the end. I've got to make sure this thing doesn't go over 2 hours or we get no AI clips. But there was a lot of activity. It seemed like everywhere you went in that building, I mean, there was a laptop battery that went flying through the air and hit a partition and definitely put a dent in it. Now, the chairs, what happened with the chairs? Explain that.
There was where the director's office was. At one time, where that director's office is located today, you know, it's enclosed by these glass walls, and that was actually a stage used for different productions, you know, where you have play activities and you have movies that were shown there. But it's a flat wooden surface, and there was office chairs that were up there, and with the wheels on the bottom of it, typical office task chair. And one of these chairs moved a good 15 feet on its own, and it hit a railing that was direct, because this was around Christmas and there was Christmas decorations on that railing. It hit that railing hard enough to knock some of the ornaments that were decorating that thing. Yeah, and we, all four of us, witnessed that. And so there was things like that occurred.
Wow.
Voices, things exploding. There was native ceramic, you know, little vases that, there was one little vase that exploded like you'd put a M80 firecracker in there or something, and it exploded. And you know, being touched, and I had been scratched in there, you know, and I watched a scratch form. You talk about being harmed, and watched a scratch form on my arm as it was happening, you know, and just like a cat scratching you hard enough to leave a bloody, you know, leave blood, you know.
So what
different things.
What do you guys do with obviously you proved that there was, you know, what people were talking about. You proved it was real. You experienced it. Your team experienced. What do you do with the evidence once whatever you picked up, what do you do with it once you collect it, the recordings, whether it be audible or camera or whatever physical evidence, what do you do with that?
Well, Chief didn't want that being stored in the office space, you know, and John and I, when we did these investigations, he wanted us to, whatever it is we wanted done with it, that was left to us, just like who we chose to be a part of those investigations. And so to this day, you know, like with the rocks, and there was one case where I had a 12-inch butcher knife fly out of a butcher block and flew right in front of me, and one of the homeowners, the knife flew about 7 or 8 feet right in front of us and went through a grapefruit right in front of us. And, you know, to this day, I still have that stuff. And of course, I've obviously smudged that stuff hundreds of times, probably over the years, but had medicine men pray over it, and but I still have a lot of that. So it is what it is.
What a great podcast. And I really want to get you guys on and have maybe a series of these, but this is kind of our initial one as all of us together. But I just want to tell you, Stanley, just second time I've had you on, just remarkable guest. And Jon, man, I'll tell you what, your depth of wisdom about everything is amazing. And Michele, my goodness, the experiences you had and the knowledge that you have to bring, I just think is absolutely amazing. And I know we're just, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I know there's so much more. So that's why I'm excited that, we can get together and put together a series of them. We can focus on specific things and then really dig in deep on those things. But I just wanted to thank you for coming on. I'm going to go ahead and close the podcast out, make sure that I get some clips off of this so I can share on TikTok and also on YouTube. But we can talk afterwards. I'll pull you off stage, do my closing. But I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here. I thought just a phenomenal podcast. Thank you.
Hey, Dale, for having
Glad
us.
to be here, Dale.
Bye. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here. I do apologize. There's just something that seems to happen when I get together with Stanley, and now it's Jon and Michele, but there just seems to be a problem with technology or buzzing on the phone or whatever. So this is the first time my camera has ever acted up. In fact, I lost my whole background on it, but at least I got the camera part to work again. But anyway, I wanted to thank you for watching it. I really hope you enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed presenting it. And if you did, go ahead and help the channel out. If you'll go ahead and give us a subscribe, maybe you'll share it, maybe put a like on that. And then also don't forget to hit that bell. That's how you're going to find out about all of the upcoming podcasts that we're going to have. We're going to have more with Stanley, Jon, and Michele. And so make sure that you hit that bell so you get notification. Next Wednesday, we're going to have Samuel Chong on. He's going to talk about the prophecy of Theabua, and that's going to be an incredible one. Also, he has a lot of information about the Chinese UAP, things that are going on in China anyway, and so a lot of insight about that. So anyway, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast, and we'll see you next time.
We are not alone. They are among us. As the skies light up, they believe we are blissfully unaware. But this activity by non-human extraterrestrial technology is capturing the attention